Good morning, Equip. We are back for another Sunday. How's everyone doing? Corin, Ross, are you good this week?
Yeah, cold, but
Doing
good.
pretty well.
Yeah,
it is.
I was loving that we had snow this week, but I'm kind of gutted that it didn't last. I was hoping to have like pure thick snow, but no.
Yeah, I know.
Annoying. But anyway, this week we are going to be chatting with someone else from our congregation. But before that, I just wanted to say, if you didn't watch Mark's commissioning last week, you literally like go on and watch it. It was such an amazing, really inspiring service, and so yeah, emotional. Get the hankies out. But if you haven't watched it yet, I would definitely recommend going to watch last week's morning service. It was so good. And also tonight we've got Small Beginnings back again. They are starting back the series on David, so please go and have a watch of that tonight at 6 o'clock. If you haven't been 7 o'clock, not 6. 6 o'clock though is the prayer meeting, so if you want to join in on that, it's on Zoom, and have a look at the Facebook community page for the details for that. But yeah, so that's everything that's happening today. We don't really have any other notices, I don't think, other than to say we are welcoming the amazing Rhona Shanks. Here she is.
Welcome, Rhona. It's great to have you. How are you?
Well, thank you. And you?
I'm doing all right.
Hey.
You look to me as though you might need some coffee.
I do. Normally, I have about 3 by the time it gets to 11 o'clock, but I only had 1 today, so I'm feeling it. So this week, we are starting off with a classic. What would you put in room 101? What would you like to get rid of forever?
Well, my immediate reaction to that is COVID-19 at the moment, but I don't know if that's in the spirit of the question. So what I would like to get rid of forever is chewing gum. I can't stand the stuff. I don't like to see people chew like a camel. I don't like to see it lying on the pavement, and it gives me memories of under exam desks at school when you get disgusting chewing gum that's been stuck there. So other than COVID-19, chewing gum.
Yeah, I would agree with that one. Yeah, I vote that in.
Yeah, me too.
I think I'll vote it as well then.
Yeah, I've heard it's very bad for the environment as well.
Yeah,
Yes, apparently. Mm-hmm.
that's a good one.
I did not know that.
Right, we've banished it from there. That's good.
Yeah, it's been voted out. Both COVID and chewing gum.
If it was only that easy.
So, Rhona, how might the youth guys know you, or where might they have seen you?
They might have seen me in the congregation. A lot of the guys who are now youth guys, when they were in P1 to B3, they might have been seen me in Sunday school class, as one of their Sunday group leaders. The other place you might have seen me is in the kitchen, maybe at a Youth Alpha or something. In the past, I have helped with the catering for Youth Alpha. So these are the kind of things they might have seen me.
Amazing. And apart from those things, what is your job? What do you do on a daily basis?
On a part-time basis, I work in Monklands Hospital, and I do scans of patients' hearts, ultrasound scans, like the technology used to look at babies and tummies, only up in your chest. So it's I've done that for a long time. I love doing it, and I love the job. I love meeting the patients, and it's a constant reminder of that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, because you see a heart in great detail and valves opening and closing and blood going through, and it just, although I've done it for a long time, it never ceases to amaze me.
That's amazing. Like, I can't even imagine that. It just must be amazing to see that every day. It's so good.
Yes.
So you do that as your job, and we've heard that you help out at Sunday school and things. Yeah. And what other ways do you maybe serve in the church, or is there anything else that you do that you like to do in general when you're not at work? What kind of things do you do?
Well, I tend to think on my service for God as being my whole life, so, and not just bits and pieces here and there, because it has to be my all, really. So when I'm at work, I'm very aware that I'm representing God there too. Other than Sunday group work, I'm in the children's hub at church. I do teas for the toddler mums through the hatch again. I enjoy being in the hub serving there, because often in children's work, children are thought of as, you know, the church of tomorrow, but for me, they're the church of today. They're there today, and they're very important to us as part of our church family right now, and not tomorrow, but now. So I enjoy serving in the Children's Hub. I think that's about that. I have another Bible study that I go to, which is out with the church house group, and it's quite challenging because there's people there from all different kind of backgrounds, and sometimes the discussion kind of goes off a tangent, and it's always a challenge to you know, reply to some of the questions that are posed.
So why do you serve in these ways, and what do you enjoy about them? What is it that makes you want to serve in these ways?
I think in the ways that I serve, it's because I love God, and I'm not serving to get brownie points. My service is not a chore. I love doing Sunday group. I love doing what I do, and I never find it a chore, and that's just because I'm doing it for the God who loves me, and that's really the only reason, and he's given so much for me. So it is a privilege to be able to do it. It's a privilege to serve alongside others in the church as well, and get to know other people, and also in seeing God's faithfulness through the years, you know, that I've served in Sunday group. I see you guys up the front, and it just brings me great delight that, you know, when you were in primary 1 to primary 3, you were sitting in the Sunday group class, and I was working out how to keep you quiet, and then you're up there, and really it's just a testament to the faithfulness of God. So these are some of the things that that's why I serve, mainly because God loves me and I love him back.
I love that.
Yeah, they're just amazing answers. And your job sounds so interesting as well.
It is, I really enjoy it, and I always have. And but the older I get, the harder it is to keep up with the technology as it moves on. But
I can barely even work Zoom, so you're doing quite well. How has lockdown affected what you do?
Well, what I do in general is made me busier at work, because you can imagine the hospital is busy, and patients that suffer from COVID need to get their heart scanned from time to time. So it's also been strange at work. There's been kind of sort of tensions and anxiety amongst staff, and some of the outpatients that are beginning to come in now. They've been shut in the house since like March time, and now they're getting an appointment to come to the hospital, and they're frightened to leave the house. You can, you know, you see some people, and they're frightened to sit down in the waiting area because they're frightened that they're going to, you know, they don't trust that we've cleaned it before they arrived. So what work has been busier, but all the other stuff in church stuff has been much quieter. I'm missing the children and missing Sunday groups, but I'm really enjoying what you guys are doing for them, and you've done really well online. So work has got busier and church life has got quieter. And I'm doing a few extra hours at work these days. So
Understandable, yeah. So how can we be praying for you?
I think lockdown I'm missing my family in lockdown. So my mum is in her 80s, and George's mum is 90. She was 90. So we get to see her because we're carers, but not my mum. So she doesn't need us for caring. So and I don't miss, I can see Jill because that's my daughter who just lives in Lindsay, but Craig, that you all know, he's in Edinburgh. So I can't get to see him. So I'm missing my family, so you can pray for that, but I'm sure we're all the same. At work, I'm always conscious at work, and I would value prayers that I would be faithful to God in my life, but at work that I would show his faithfulness in my interactions with my colleagues and with patients that I come across who might be, not that I want to preach the gospel to the patients, but just that there would be something in me that would make them feel relaxed and, you know, cared for in their hospital visit. And so just that my attitude would be correct and Christ-like, and most importantly, that I would always keep a close walk with him, because anything that I do out with that is going to be of no use if I'm not reliant on him for my strength and for anything that I do, whether it's at work or in Sunday group.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Do you have a favourite Bible verse you'd like to share with us?
The one I've chosen to share with you is Philippians chapter 1 and verse 6. It was written in front of my Bible when I was baptized in 1980. And it says, being confident of this, he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. So just to share with you, he is faithful. He's begun a good work and he'll carry us on through until he comes or calls us home. So that's the verse I'd like to share.
Thank you. And lastly, do you have a piece of advice that you'd like to share with us?
The piece of advice that I'd like to share with the young folk is to live your life to an audience of one. Don't try to seek the approval of other people. That audience of one is God, and if you get it that bit right, the rest of it will be absolutely fine. If you've got God's approval, then the rest will be fine. So live your life to an audience of one, and that's my advice to you. But what?
So much wisdom, so much wisdom. I love it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rhona. That has been really nice, and I think everyone that watches this will just really enjoy it and feel lighter.
Yeah. So I'm going to have a cup of coffee now.
Well, we'll all have a cup of coffee. I'll get another cup of tea and sit and watch Ross's talk. Ross, what are you talking on?
I am talking on the promise that God works through our weaknesses.
Amazing.
Good,
Right,
good.
and we go to Ross's talk.
Yeah. So Rhona, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll now head over to Ross. See you later.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Thanks for that, guys. That was brilliant. So, like we said, today we're taking a look at the promise that God works through our weaknesses. And firstly, I thought we could take a look at a few verses in 2 Corinthians. So, for a little bit of context, 2 Corinthians contains Paul's 4th letter to the church he founded in Corinth. It's a church that's deeply struggling with issues of division, spiritual immaturity, and false teaching. So the verses are 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 8 to 10. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So 3 times Paul pleaded to God that he would take this thorn from him. The thorn in Paul's flesh is very clearly not something small. The fact that he pleaded to God just shows us that, you know, if it was something quite small, you wouldn't go pleading to someone that they would take it away from you. This was pretty major, and I can imagine he would have felt like it was impeding his ability to perform his ministry. I'm reminded here of when Jesus prayed 3 times in the Garden of Gethsemane for God to take his cup from him, just before he's crucified. It's such a powerful passage in Luke. Jesus' full humanity is on display, yet it's complete obedience to the Father's plan, yet not my will but yours be done. If you have people trying to undermine you, then surely expressing how much you're struggling with this thorn is only going to give them ammunition for their attack on you and your ability to lead them through this rough patch. But as we read on, we'll start to see how this is actually the exact opposite. When we read verse 9, we hear God's response. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. At this point, you'd imagine that if removing this thorn was the most beneficial thing for Paul's ministry, for the advancement of the gospel, and for the security of the church, then we would perhaps more see a response along the lines of, sure thing, Paul, that's you sorted out, you shouldn't have an issue anymore. But that's not what God responds with. In God's infinite wisdom, he chooses not to take the thorn from Paul. We can't even begin to get our head around how wise God is. And it becomes clear that God has got a plan for using Paul's weakness for good. Now, often the easiest prayer that we can pray is for God to take away our struggle completely. It's the most logical thing, isn't it? Well, it's definitely the easiest thing to ask at first, but if God doesn't grant it and you're left waiting a while, you're bound to become frustrated. I've had it happen myself. Perhaps the prayer we should be praying more often is that God provides us with the strength to cope with the issue, and that he can allow us to turn our weakness into a strength both for our ministry and our personal discipleship. Now, each of the disciples had their own struggles and weaknesses. Peter was impulsive, impetuous, and he denied Jesus 3 times. James and John, the sons of thunder. Gotta say, it's my favourite nickname in the entirety of the Bible. Sons of thunder. Amazing. They both wanted to sit at Jesus' right hand, above the other disciples. They wanted a higher position. And Thomas, infamously known as Doubting Thomas, he doubted that Jesus had risen from the grave, going as far as to say that he would only believe if he himself could touch the wounds from the nails and from the spear. They were all men who struggled in one way or another. They were human, just like you or I, yet we know that God used each of them in absolutely incredible ways. Now, in the second half of verse 9 and going into verse 10, we see Paul's response to what God has said to him. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Paul has recognised that the weaknesses he faces are the things that God will use to bring security to the church in Corinth. And in that, begins to express in later verses in the chapter how he was a fool of trying to prove himself. He's felt as though he's had to prove that he's worthy to be their leader, that he's worthy to be someone they look up to. He knows that God has a reason for him having that weakness, and that he shouldn't let it deter him from what he's trying to do. He shouldn't allow it to divert his path from what he's trying to do. Now, another prime example of God working through weakness has got to be David and Goliath. The child versus the giant, God's hand versus the Philistine champion. Now, a bit of a common misconception might be that Goliath was twice, 3 times, or possibly even more the height of David. This is obviously by the way he's painted when we think about the event, but in reality he was likely around about 6'9". Now obviously that's still an absolute giant by today's standards. It's a big man. And he would have been absolutely terrifying to face up against in melee combat. The amount of power that he would be able to swing a sword with, or in this case his bronze spear. So to give you a bit of a clearer idea of the height difference between David and Goliath, if you have a little think about Hafthor Bjornsson, commonly known as the Mountain, a very gargantuan man to say the least, be like him standing next to Kevin Hart and them trying to fight each other. It'd be petrifying for David to say the least. Now, with knowing that David was tiny in comparison, he will have surely known that there was no chance of him winning through his own strength, meaning that his victory needed to come from God, and we see him recognising this in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 34 to 37. But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Now David's weakness is in his size, and he knows it. Goliath's weakness is in his pride and his arrogance, believing that he is the greatest warrior. But it's his arrogance that blinds him. Now often when we think about God working through weaknesses, we only think about God working through David's weakness alone. But God is also at work in Goliath's weakness. Without Goliath's arrogance, he may be more cautious going into battle with David. He may have planned his attack a bit more carefully after watching his opponent and how he plans to go about the battle. But he believed it to be over before it began, and as a result, he's struck down by David. He is killed. The devil preys on our weaknesses. It might not always be an attempt to make us fall into them, but he'll often try to make us feel insecure about them, to feel like we're not worthy or that we can't do any good works for God because of them. And Goliath tries to do that to David in verses 43 and 44. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and to the wild animals." Now, you might be struggling with the pressures of online schooling, or perhaps it's the effect of multiple lockdown periods taking a toll, but whatever it is you're struggling with, whatever challenge you're facing, know that you are not alone. In each and every one of those challenges you find yourself faced with, God is standing next to you. The God we ask for strength from now is the same God that was standing next to Paul as he sought strength to be able to strengthen the church. He's the same God we heard about a few weeks ago that closed the mouth of the lions and saved Daniel's life. He's the same God who delivered David from his seemingly impossible battle against Goliath. We read about our God performing incredible feats, and yet sometimes we forget how blessed we are that He wishes a relationship with us and to be able to bring strength from our weaknesses. David knew that even though he is too weak, that in the strength of the Lord God Almighty, he could defeat Goliath. And that is what we need to remember when we feel like our weakness is too difficult to overcome. Now, recently I found myself using a tactic that someone told me about, and I can't remember for the life of me where it was I heard it. But it really helps to get rid of any negative thoughts that have been put there by the devil in his mission to stop us from doing God's work. And it's to audibly rebuke those thoughts. When the devil starts to move in on your mind, then open your mouth and in the name of Jesus Christ, rebuke the devil's work, telling him that you will not be dismayed, for you know that the strength comes from the Lord our God, and that his strength is greater than any weakness in your life. It is a great way to combat feelings of doubt in ourselves, or if we're comparing ourselves to others. Remembering and audibly telling ourselves that we know that those thoughts aren't of God, because it is in God's perfect image that we are fearfully and wonderfully designed, a masterpiece of grandeur sculpted by the artist above all. We are people prone to weakness. Even people regarded as the greatest among us are filled with weaknesses, but we are also a people through whom God is performing, and will continue to perform great deeds in His name. So as I come to the end of the talk, I'll leave you with a reminder to pray about your weaknesses. Firstly, that God would remove it, and straight after, that if it is not in God's plan to remove it, that He would give you the ability to combat it and to turn it from a weakness into a strength. Thanks for joining us this week, and we will see you next Sunday as we continue our series on God's promises. See you next week.